Hello, my brothers and my sisters. This is Sister Joy. God bless you. I pray that everyone is having a wonderful day. I did an exhortation regarding how I disengaged myself from church and the doctrine of men. But I want to share with you the story of how I stepped back, how my journey in the church began. I shared with you previously that when I was 12 or 13, my father died. I was brought up in church, and he passed, so it was like a life transitioning moment for me because my life was never the same after that. So I grew up, graduated, did all the typical things that we all do, went to business college, etc., and got married. And I also shared with you something regarding that a mate had succumbed to cancer. Well, as time went on, and I'm on this journey, and I felt like, well, I need to return back to God after all of these years. That's what I wanted to do. My heart was longing for something, maybe because my heart was broken. I had lost people that were important to me, and I was having a hard time. So I went back to God. I stepped back into church. I was trying to step back to God, and I thought I was. But I began to seek God, went to the revivals. Every minute that I had out of work, I was at church. I was working in a very lucrative position. I was achieving a lot of things in this company. And these are millionaires. And before I made the decision to go back to church, there's a difference in returning to God and returning to a building or a church. But I went through a phase where I was so hurt and lost about some things. I was socializing with people at this lucrative job. These are millionaires, 10 times over. I was working for this company, a family-owned, and I was partying at that time. I felt like my life was spinning out of control, and it helped me make the decision that out of all the things I was doing and the money and what I was achieving, I was still empty inside. Something was missing, and I came to the conclusion that something was God. So I went back to church. I stepped back into the church for the first time. The revival, sought God, was at the altar, and God did step into my life, and God did save me. And he immediately started, well, not immediately, it was over a period of time, that he began to show me things because I was faithful. Gave my tithes, went to a church, and I was dedicated. I was there every Bible study, every service, paid my tithes, and then some. So I was in it. It was all about God to me. And I announced at my job that I was raised in church, and I'm no longer going to participate in the things that I was participating in previously with them. The partying. These people had jacuzzis in the offices, and I mean, it was just money flowing, but I just want to do my job and to continue on in a different type of life. Well, some people were resentful about that. I was dating an executive where the owners and owners' sons had big offices, and he had an office there. And this was some years after the death, because I didn't date for years after I lost a mate. for years. It took me years. But I threw myself into working. I was working all the time, and I ended up landing a lucrative job at this company, and they own numerous companies around the United States. And I announced that, you know, I'm turning my life around. I was raised in church, I told all of them, and I was going back to God. I was going back to where there was love and peace, and I meant it. I guess they thought that I was just gonna be in that for a moment, but it didn't happen. I stayed with God, and I was giving a lot of money to the church. And there came a time where people became antagonistic against me on my job, and I thought about, well, Lord, what is this going on? These are the people I have hung out with for years, did things with, probably a lot of things I shouldn't have did, but the whole climate changed. And so I decided, well, I'm going to go in prayer about it, went on some fasts, and ask God to help me, you know, because this is my money that I pay my bills with. I was trying to pay my house off, you know, my cars, things like that. So I didn't want any static. But as it turned out, I didn't have a choice in the matter. I was treated very differently, again, because I wasn't partying anymore, and I wasn't seeing the individual, the executive that I was dating. I no longer saw him. I spoke to him, and I was cordial and kind to him, but I was no longer going to commit fornication. And I invited him to church. He didn't want any parts of it, and he couldn't understand why it would change our relationship. And I told him, outside of marriage, you know, I can't function in that capacity, because I was true to God. I was true to God. I walked it. And he was taken aback that, you know, how can you put yourself in this position? What are you doing? Didn't like it at all. So I was having a hard time, even though when I saw him or any of the rest, I spoke, I was cordial. I did my job 100% at that point. I had been getting raise after raise and climbing for quite some time. So I was doing well, and suddenly I didn't get raises anymore, and they were all connected in the office, the party group, I call them. And somehow, well, not somehow, some things came up where I got injured. That's another video, and I'll tell you about that sometime. But I got injured, and I was off work. I had to have surgery. The injury was pretty bad that happened at the workplace. And I had to have surgery. And so the doctors took me off for a period, and I just wanted a settlement for my injury, because I wasn't going to be able to function in the capacity that I previously did ever again. There was a period of time I was so injured that I couldn't walk. But I had turned my life over to God, and I turned that over to him as well. And eventually I was able to walk, and I was able to manage a somewhat normal life, but it would never be the same again, the doctors told me. So I just wanted to be, the atmosphere at the job was so hostile, I didn't want to be there. And after my lawyer filed a suit against them and for my injuries and etc., people began to break into my car at the work, and it was a lot of bad things going on. So I just severed the tie. I didn't want to be in this anymore, and I ended it there. They ended up paying me, but it was a drop in the bucket compared to what most people would receive, because I just wanted it done, and I wanted the servants of the relationship completely. So I just settled. It was pennies. And I joined this church. So I was telling the pastor, I was telling him about the issues I was going through, what problems I was having on the job since I left that life alone. And I'm thinking, well, he can be the mediator and we can get this settled. He can talk to them. She's a member of my church. Let's settle this. Let's just, get it done in a right and respectful way. I had worked for this company for almost a decade, and I thought he would help me do what was right. But as it turned out, I was involved with one of the churches who were they were living by man's doctrine and the almighty dollar. He got with this family, and somehow, well, not somehow, they donated $75,000 to this church. And this pastor began to treat me really badly, and I started having problems in the church. And I'm thinking, well, wow, Lord, what is this? And someone came to me and said, well, you know, they gave him a $75,000 donation, and on and on. So then the issues that I told you about in the previous video about the witchcraft that I was threatened with. And I got up out of the middle of the service one day when he was having a sermon about how many alligator shoes that he owned. And from what I understand, alligator shoes go from 500 and up. But this was a sermon. So I said, the Lord told me, get up and leave, to be done with this. And I walked out, and I was going down the steps of the church, and he caught me and told me, you better not tell anybody about this. You better not tell anybody but Jesus. He threatened me. And I never went back to that church. And of course, that was my first time trying to connect back with God and the church. And it was a horrible experience. And that's when I went to the mountains. And God had me walk around that mountain for a long time, and I ended up teaching international students English and etc. in an outside church on the mountains. So check out my videos. I shared something about that, but the Lord was telling me that the church's weakness in high places involves the church, because they're teaching man doctrines and not the doctrine of Jesus Christ. So that was how my bumpy starts began, coming back to God with a pastor who worshiped money, and it was wild. So I just wanted to share, because the condition of the churches is pretty bad. I mean, there are churches that are teaching the true doctrine of Christ, but they have taken a wrong turn, the churches. And so just wanted to share. And check out my next video, because I'm going to be talking about the sermons on the mountain. And I understand why God went to the mountains when he left heaven. It is beautiful there. And I want to tell you about how God has brought me from a mighty long way, and that regardless of what, I will not take down. I will serve him. I love him. And regardless of what horrible things I've been through, might go through, I'm going to serve God until the day I die. God bless you. Sister Joyce. Talk to you later.